Dave, I'm so happy to announce it is officially spring. It's not that I've seen the first robin of spring. It's not that I've seen the pollen flying through the air so heavy that I thought it was a snowstorm, although both of those things did happen. But even more importantly, I heard the familiar sound of the ice cream truck coming down the lane over at Philadelphia.
Oh my God, this is the thing that I am most envious of Brad's life. The ice cream man is coming down the street.
And it's so great.
So for the benefit of our foreign friends, tell people what the ice cream man is in Philadelphia.
So it's a truck that comes down the street, and it almost think of a food truck, except they don't park. They just drive up and down the street. And it always has a little tinkling song that plays, like a little bell song. And if you want an ice cream, you go out and stand on the sidewalk and wave. He stops, gets out of the driver's seat, goes into the back of the truck, opens up a window, and he's got a soft serve ice cream maker back there. And he serves ice cream and sundaes and shakes and those kind of confections out of the side of his truck.
Wait. Time out. Yeah. Shakes? They do shakes?
Shakes and sundaes with toppings.
And malts? Do they do malts?
I think it's just a shake because malts technically have a thickener in it.
That's what I mean. They have that like powdery thing.
Yeah. But definitely milkshakes because my one son loves getting a chocolate milkshake from the truck.
My mind is blown at shakes. I don't know why that seems like a new innovation to me. That's okay. So, I have to tell you, gang, we've been a long time topic on the show that I am so envious of this because once every 3 years will I have an ice cream man drive down my street. Yeah. And I get so excited and I never have $1 on me. Brad gets this. Once it gets going, the ice cream man comes by once or twice a day in your street, right?
And like there's a park at 2 blocks away from us, like a little park with equipment and stuff for kids to play and so forth. He'll go up there and just park next to the park.
Oh my God! So it's like a shark just hanging around an algae bed, like waiting for the fish to and
makes bank. But this guy has been in our neighborhood for so long. He's seen our kids grow up. You know, he'll see me out there with my sons who are now taller than I am. And he's like, I remember when you had them in your arms coming up here, you know, and it's just, and we see him year after year, same guy. And so it was Saturday, and I had just come home from exhibiting at the Moore College Comics Expo down at the Moore College of Art Design.
Yeah, you did.
And basically, once again, through my membership of the National Cartoonist Society, we had gotten tables down there, and I always kind of look at it
free tables?
Technically this year it was a discount, but it was $20. It was like,
oh my God,
I can afford that.
I can swing that.
If I wanted to, I could have walked to the venue. It was
really?
walkable from my house. My thought once they've started doing this is that if I make back my dues money by doing this show, it's kind of a wash. And I came within a couple bucks of doing that, so it was all good. Plus, you're out there talking comics and stuff and promoting the show. Of course, Dave, I told them all about you. They were thrilled. And, and it was a very nice day. But I am not an extrovert. And I came home and was lying on the bed with my eyes closed because, Dave, I had peopled for way too long at that point. And I just needed to have some time in a dark room. And I hear out on the sidewalk the sound of the ice cream truck coming up, and I'm like, it makes me happy, but I didn't give it any more thought than that. All of a sudden, I hear these bounding footsteps up the stairs, bump, 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 knock on the door, and it's my older son Alex, who says, "Dad, it's the ice cream truck." And I start to get out of bed because it's like I know what's happening next. He says, "Do you want something?" And I go, "Yeah." He says, "I got it." And boom, 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 bounding down the stairs. And I'm like, I think I'm getting treated to ice cream today. And I'm telling you, I kind of had a lump in my throat, not for nothing. There's no better feeling than having an act of thoughtfulness like that from one of your kids. It was not. This is not an expensive ice cream. You know, it's $4, right? But it was the best tasting ice cream I've had since I don't know when, because it was like he came up or my son came up and said, "Do you want something?" And
right.
It just, when they said that to me, it made me feel like $1 million.
Of course it would. Can I tell you, dad to dad? Of course it would.
Yes.
Because listen, it's you're getting free ice cream, so that's
nothing tastes better than free food. That is the Brad Geiger promise.
That's the better. But more important than that, though, it's years and years of ER visits and nights up late and like recitals and practices and like just trying to instill joy-filled kindness into your child. Yeah. And then they return it and say, "Hey, Pop, would you like an ice cream?" And you're like, "Yes, I would."
As a matter of fact, chocolate dipped, please.
Because you see them. I mean, listen, I'm at the stage where we're staring down college and going out in the world and becoming an adult, and I find myself singing, "Where the cat's in the cradle in the silver spoon," like all the time, because you're like, how can you not have these thoughts as a parent when they're getting to this stage? And Brad, to have a kid come get you an ice cream is the best thing ever.
It was the best tasting ice cream. Yeah.
Oh, Brad, I'm so happy for you, my friend. I don't know why that's getting my heart.
I'm telling you, it's such a dumb thing to get choked up about, but I have a lump in my throat.
I get it. I don't know why it's getting me, but it's getting me vicariously. So I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about vicariously crying over ice cream and making comics.
And two old men crying over dairy products and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And we've got a fun show for everybody. Brad and I just went over it before we turned on the mics, and this is a great one. But I've got a fantastic question I want to ask my old friend Brad Geiger.
Yes, I'm ready.
It says, "Dear favorite comic uncles," both of which are crying over ice cream.
Yes.
"I've heard you talk about choosing names based on simplicity and how some sound funnier for specific reasons. Do you think that idea can apply more broadly to word choice? Yes. So in dialogue or text or character exclamations. I'm in the process of writing a short story, and for the purpose of the story, I could either use psychiatrist or psychologist. I know context matters, but does one generally land funnier than the other? Do you have a process for choosing words to get a specific desired effect? I enjoy a lot of podcasts, but yours is the only one I listen to every week. A big thanks to Dave for sharing his Scottish accent for positive affirmations, and Brad sharing an alternative way of pronouncing the name of the city I live in, Cincinnati." What was the weird version of Cincinnati that you had?
I think Cincinnati is technically wrong. I think if you're in that town, they call it Cincinnati.
No, it can't be Cincinnati. That's the
I think that's the proper one. I think if you speak to someone who is living there, it's Cincinnati.
Cincinnati?
I think so.
Right. Listen, up is down and down is up. That's not right. That can't be right. Although, if that is right, then I've been saying it wrong for decades and decades. I always laugh at how just English accepts a name. Like the Italians come to us and they say, "Our country is called Italia. That's the name of our country. It's Italia. We all know it. This is what we say." Yeah. And English speakers around the world go, "Oh, that's very nice. We're going to call you Italy. F you. Yeah. F you and your chosen name. We're going to call you Italy."
And by the way, let's not even talk about what we did to Deutschland. That just were like, Deutschland? No. You're Germany.
No, you're Germany. But how will you? You're Germany.
Yeah. We've already got the Dutch. We can't handle that kind of nuance. We're just going to call you Germany.
Also, listen, we're not learning anybody's languages. That's our policy. English speakers around the world are like, "Nope, we're not learning anybody's anything." And so Cincinnati is, it can't be right. We need clarity
and by the way,
on this.
Missouri is not Missouri.
I do know that that's
Missourian,
Missouri.
It's Missouri.
I do know that it's Missouri, but it's, I'll be honest, and this is my own sort of regional hoity-toityism. As soon as somebody says Missouri, they go down a notch in my mind.
Well, no, that's you gotta meet people where they are. I'll tell you what, if I'm right about Cincinnati and Missouri, we'll put a bet on it. And we'll put dinner up for grabs. And if I'm wrong about it, I'll take you to my favorite place, the Spaghetti Warehouse. and we'll just have it done.
It's almost like Louisiana, when it's said right, there's like 3 or 4 vowels and consonants that are just dropped out of it because it becomes Louisiana.
Yeah.
And like you're like, wait, you're missing a chunk there. No, it's Louisiana.
No.
It's Louisiana.
It's hot down here. We don't have time for all those syllables. We're in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah, you're right. New Orleans is better because it becomes Nolans. And you're just like, wait a minute, you dropped off entire consonants there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to this question, Brad. The choice here, because we've talked about title choices, of which are absolutely, there are funnier options to go with. But in word choice, in dialogue, in character text, are there choices that are funnier than others, Brad? Before we answer this specific question about psychologists and psychiatrists, are there funnier choices to go with word to word?
Yes, 100%. And that's why I find myself writing and rewriting, even as I'm working on the comic itself. I'm constantly readjusting those words in the word balloons, looking for the best read, the funniest read, the best way to align those lines inside the word balloons so that they read with the right rhythm and the right, all of that stuff. Bolding wherever it's needed to put emphasis on certain words. When you're working in humor, it's all about that. You cannot afford, I don't think, if you're trying to be funny, you can't afford to just, if you're a digital artist particularly, to just draw a text box and type the words in like you would on a Word document and let those words fall wherever they do and not think about the line breaks and the phrasing and putting a bold where it's needed, and at the same time not putting a bold in every sentence, because then it has no effect at all. And all of that stuff comes around to what we're talking about in terms of these words, these phrases are not all created equal. And yes, there's one word that's funnier than another in a lot of circumstances, just like this, just like between psychologist and psychiatrist.
Yeah. And so I want to hit this because I have been around comedy writers, and Brad and I have done this on the show and on Writer's Room, if you listen in, where we will argue sometimes for up to 10 minutes about which is funnier when it comes to phoneme. I always pronounce this wrong. Phonemes, which are like the smallest unit of spoken English, and so things like, if you have a choice between vase and bottle is the funnier choice because that glottal stop of ottle is just funnier in English. Donkey is funnier than horse because you have the ong, you have the K, which is all K's are always a funnier
K's
letter.
Are funny.
Things like thick or any words that end in a strong K at the end makes for comedy a lot. Things like that sort of phlegm sounds like Loch Ness or Bach, or things like a schlock, like words like that. Those are funny.
Yeah. SHs are funny.
There's a billion phonemes that I could go down, but you get the idea. Is that Brad and I will often on Writer's Room be like, okay, that's a funny word. Water is a funny word, but is there a funnier word than water? And then we'll argue about water alternatives or synonyms or homonyms for 10 minutes about trying to find a funny word. So the answer there is yes, absolutely. And as Brad has often said, and I want to hit on this before, not only if you're trying to write for comedy, not only when you're getting to a punchline is that important, but often you want to land on a punch word, so that the funniest word, and oftentimes the funniest sounding word, comes at the end of the punchline, right? So that you really hit them over the head with that punch word at the end. So very often you want to save the funniest sounding word that also lands the joke to the end of the sentence. So yes, this absolutely plays into comedy writing, is the sound of a word, the feel of a word sometimes, as people are saying it in their head, makes an important difference.
That's how you can always tell if you've got like a comedy writer's laptop in front of you and you go and you open their browser. And I'm being very serious about this. You'll always see one of the tabs is a thesaurus. I've got thesaurus.com open all the time because I'm always looking for other words that are better, more succinct, have a better pattern, have a better rhythm, or are just plain old funnier.
And slightly different, but I'll recommend this to anybody. Roget's, I think,
Roget's
Roget.
thesaurus.
But they also make a slightly different book that's about 3.5 inches, 4 inches thick that I own, called a synonym finder, which is different than a thesaurus, believe it or not. And I often find it to be more effective than a thesaurus. So I don't know what the technical difference is, but you get a broader and sometimes funnier versions of words in a synonym finder than you do in a thesaurus. I'll also say another thing that I do a lot is what's called a rhyming dictionary. And if you want to try to plunk down some cash for that, a rhyming dictionary is great. Also, you can just use rhymezone.com. That's another good one as an asset. But there's a lot of times where if you can get an internal rhyme in a sentence, sometimes the appearance of symmetry can make a joke funnier. And Brad, what would that be in terms of an appearance of symmetry? What does that imply?
Oh, that implies a pattern. It implies repetition. Yes. It implies order, right? And
that's what I was going to say. Is order is implied, and then you're breaking it usually with the punch word. So
exactly.
Yes, so anyway, these are all tricks of the trade that you can use. So words do matter. But what's funny about the specific question with psychologist and psychiatrist, both of which are $9 words with a billion synonyms. So first of all, from a comic standpoint, you really want to avoid multisyllabic words because eventually you're going to come to a word balloon where you're going to have to break it somehow. And I personally try to avoid word breakages where you have to dash it, mid-word and say bourgeois dash Z, and you're like, all right, well, that's shitty for everybody involved. Right. So I try to avoid word breaks. So my thought was, instead of psychologist or psychiatrist in general, if you're going for comedy, use a word like shrink, which has a nice heavy K at the end, has a delightful SH. SHs are always great for comedy, and it's short. Is it a little bit diminutive? Is it maybe a little bit insulting? That's for you to decide. I'm just giving you a comedy alt pitch on what the word you could use here. Brad, do you have thoughts about psychiatrists and psychologists?
It's we did not discuss this beforehand, but you and I both landed on the same area. And here's why. Back when I worked in newspapers, reporters would use this joke to describe me and the other graphic artists in the building very often. They'd say, how many graphic artists does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer is, does it have to be a light bulb? Right? Because every time they would bring me something that they would want a visual on, it would always be that. It was like, does it have to be a light bulb? Does it have to be a jigsaw puzzle piece again? Another layout with a jigsaw puzzle piece, or shaking hands? Right now, all the graphic artists listening are, boiling.
Or a dove of peace. There's always a dove of peace in some graphic artist piece. Yes.
All of that trite stuff. So I did. I went the same way. And here's what you don't do necessarily if you're writing comedy. And that is, like, I could see this person thinking to themselves, well, is it better to do psychologist or psychiatrist? Well, a psychiatrist can prescribe drugs and medicine, but a psychologist can't. And a psychologist does this. And here's the problem. Despite what you might read on Reddit comments, scientific accuracy has very little to do with writing funny.
That's true.
It's the last thing I'm worried about is accuracy when I'm writing something. I'm worried about making you laugh in the moment. And then if later on that psychologist has to write a prescription, we'll figure that out later. I don't care about accuracy. And by the way, that you'll see that Reddit has a very specific type of commenter. And this drives them up the wall, right? Because they and I've seen that comment under other people's comments.
Oh, you mean pedantic? Oh, you mean pedantry? Yes, Fred.
Oh, I can't stand. It was something. It was one of my comics. It was a great comic. A woman is up at a coffee station with her tea. And it's got all these different types of honey, raw honey, natural honey, organic honey. And on the far end of the table is a bee sitting in a chair. And the bee says, who we kidding? Bring that over here and let me vomit in it for you. It started off a whole thing of people pointing out that honey is not technically bee vomit. It is true that they take it into their mouth and then they process it and spit it back out. But since it's not digested, it's not really
stomach digestion.
vomit.
Yeah.
Right. And
you know what's fun here, Brad? You know what's fun? It's completely ruining any joy in life by that.
I know.
By them trying to.
Well, somebody pointed out that it's not vomit. Somebody put a comment under that saying, "Thank you. I hate it when people try to be funny and they don't know what they're talking about." And it's like, no, I knew what I'm talking about. Here's the problem. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah. It's about making you laugh in that moment. That's what's important. I don't care about scientific accuracy.
This is a separate topic entirely, but that's why Brad and I always say you got to sort of listen to the readers, not listen to the reader, because I'm sure that comic got upvoted 18,000 people, but 300 people angrily upvoted the comment about the bee vomit because the pedantics in the crowd were like, "Oh, I'm so angry about this. This is bees. I've studied bees for 14 years and I hate it when people get this wrong." And you're like, all right, listen, go out and touch grass. Yes, I've had that exact same thing on Reddit where the upvotes are gigantic, but the top comment is the thing that I got scientifically wrong. It's like, listen, I knew what the science was. I'm just making a joke here, gang. Let's slow it down. Yeah. But yes, so with psychologists and shrink, did you have an alternate opinion on what pitch you would give?
I did immediately. And mine was psychotherapist, because psycho is right in the very first syllable and of course has multiple meanings. So I went to psychotherapist. I think shrink is probably the better call. If you were going to have a character who was going to be a recurring character in a comic strip, and you had to say what their job title was, right? I was immediately thinking Evil Inc. I've got somebody who's a superhuman resources manager. I've got somebody who's a henchman coordinator, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't say, oh, and here's Jerry. He's the shrink. I would have to have a title sounding person, right? Or a title to put on their door in their office. And then I would opt for psychotherapist, also because I could more easily break psychotherapist into two lines if I had to, because I think depending on the usage, it might even be hyphenated or two different words. So my standing rule about never, ever, ever hyphenating a word, if it's got kind of a natural break in there, then if I need to, I can do it. However, if it was a word balloon and somebody, as opposed to a sign on a door, if it was a word balloon and they're saying, "Oh, I got to meet my friend Jerry. He's a shrink." That's the funnier word in that case. In other words, in that word balloon, you wouldn't say he's a psychotherapist. You'd say, "My friend Jerry's a shrink." So I think overall, yours is the funnier word. But I would argue that in certain positions, in certain cases, I would probably lean towards psychotherapist.
And I will even grant you that you might need to use one or two as the intro panel or intro to the character. So when they say he's a psychiatrist or he's a psychologist,
right?
Or but here's the thing is, and I want you to close your eyes and think this, lay this out in your mind. He's a psychiatrist. Right. You end up with one of Brad and I's least favorite word balloons, which is the hot dog shape. It's just unpleasing. It sits uncomfortably in a panel, and so. For that reason, and also for reading speed and reading legibility, I try to avoid multisyllabic words like psychiatrist, because you end up with this gigantic long word balloon that's unpleasing, basically. So I would, but having said that, you usually in something like this, you have to establish if a character is coming in for the first time ever, right? Saying he's a psychiatrist, and then the rest of the time, maybe you can get away with the slightly less educated character calling them a shrink every time they are about to do something, right? And then, so that's sort of the give and take of comedy, is that sometimes you have to establish a thing, and then you can move away from it very quickly, so everyone's on board about what they are, that kind of thing.
As long as we're talking about this, I'd like to bring in another question that we've gotten earlier that dovetails very nicely into this. And it's a question that somebody wrote in, and they basically are asking about writing good dialogue. Listen to this. It goes like this. What's the strategy for writing good dialogue? Or better yet, how do you edit your way to great dialogue? I'd love a model like the story circle, but for writing what characters are actually saying, if such a thing exists. Thank you so much for the excellent advice and all the laughs. And the reason I bring this up is because I don't know that one of the reasons that we haven't been able to answer that yet is because every time it comes up, my response is, I don't think I'm a good person to ask about writing good dialogue, or at least
that's not true.
Well,
no.
I'm not in the sense that this person seems to be asking, right? Because when I write dialogue, I the last thing on my mind is trying to convey to you that this person grew up in the deep South and had a rural background. Mm-hmm. That's not important to me. Making the punchline land that day is important to me. So everything that I'm going to go through, every word use, every phrase is built to optimize whatever that punchline is, because I'm writing humor at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's how I wrote fables. When I wrote fables, it's how I write, like if I'm writing something that's more serious, like sci-fi, even when I did the Tales from the Drive, I wrote it in the same way, not necessarily towards the punchline, but towards that significant moment.
Right.
And that's why, like, when this person is asking writing good dialogue to me, and I don't think it's what this person wants out of advice, but good dialogue to me is whatever makes that final moment that you're building towards land the strongest. And usually that's a punchline for me. So I don't know that I'm equipped to talk about writing good dialogue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we'll answer this, but first I just want to say that I think you're eminently qualified to talk about this. Your writing is super tight, and I think you know it more intuitively than you think, such that you forget all the steps that you're going to go through in your writing. And I'll tell you what I mean. I'm going to describe how I write a page of Drive.
Yeah.
And I bet you that Brad does the same. Or similar. In fact, it'll be fun to see the differences. I bet he writes it similarly and with similar considerations, so much so that after 20 years, he doesn't even think that he's doing this, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, he just does it without thinking. So here's the broad strokes of how I write a Drive page. Keep in mind, Drive is a long form storyline. It's going to end up being, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 pages of a story. So it's going to take a hot minute for me to get through this whole thing. But as Brad and I always talk about, it's delivered in discrete packages, units on a website. Sometimes that's a page, sometimes that's multiple pages. And each of those pages get you to a satisfying ending, right? So there's fundamentally two things that I have to do when I start writing a Drive page. One is I always think about what exposition needs to get out on this page to move the story forward. So it's like, all right, I need to establish that the emperor killed his brother when he came to the throne. That's got to come out on this page. And I need to get out somehow that he used the secret police of the empire to do it. Okay, so those two things I have to get out on this page. And I need to somehow end this on a joke that I establish naturally over the course of the 6 to 7 panels, right? It can't just become artificially at the end. So somehow I have to weave in those three things into 4, 5, 6, 7 panels and get us to a satisfying emotional close on this page. But move it forward in a way that helps the 2,000 pages arc of this story keep chugging along, right? Yeah. So that's the big 30,000 feet jet flying overhead. That's what I have to do on this page. So I will write out a script that gets me there, right? And it's usually pretty rough. It's rough around the edges, you know. It's looking like somebody pronounced it Cincinnati when I first write it out. It's like it doesn't feel right. It feels like somebody made a mistake, you know. And so it's very awkward. And what I'll do is I will tell you this, I write it out pen and ink because it's a more naturalistic process towards scratching out, moving, arcing, you know, circling a word or a sentence structure and arrowing it up to this part of the page. You just can't do that kind of stuff digitally. Yeah. So I'm a big advocate for the writing stage still being pen on ink. I know for some of you that makes me sound like Grandpa Moses, like, oh, look at Grandpa over here with his pen and ink. I'm telling you, for a writing process, it helps because when you're 2 hours in And you're like, wait, what did I have before?
Yes.
You can look under the scratched out letters. You can't do that when you've erased something in Microsoft Word, you know? You can look under the scratched out letters. You can see how you originally structured it. You can see stages of how you structured it along the way. And so I still find advantage in that. Anyway, as I'm going, what I'll do too is, so now I've got the 3 bits I need. I've got the Emperor killed his brother, he used the secret police, and we're going to end on a joke. I've got all 3 on the page, but it's not smooth yet. So what do I do now? Now I read it out loud in different voices. For me, not everybody does this. You can do it in your head, but I find specifically reading it out loud shows you the imperfect nature of how written language is different than spoken language.
Right.
And so very often you can change around your sentence structure based on, no one would actually say disambiguous. What you would say is, you would say you'd say another word choice, right? There are ways that people speak that are not the ways people write spoken speech. And so only in saying it out loud do you go, oh, this sounds wonky as hell. No one would say it like this, you know? And so that becomes a writing pass, right? Is speaking out loud. Then the next stage, and Brad will recognize this very clearly, is no matter what I have written, I can take out 30% of that. And I guarantee you, no matter what script you have in front of you, you can take out 30% of it. It is fluff. It is stuff that emotionally got you through the writing stage, but now you can take it out because it's unnecessary. So I can then immediately take out 30% of whatever I've written, right? So that's that. Then the final stage is, and this is the God's honest truth, finding funnier and shorter word alternates for the ones that I have taken. So then I do a pass of like, hey, did I use bourgeoisie? Well, then get rid of bourgeoisie and say hoity-toity or rich, or, you know, some other shorter word that more people would recognize at a 6th to 7th grade reading level rather than a college reading level, right? So get rid of your 9-cent words and go to a funnier, shorter, closer to monosyllabic word choices, right? And then the final stage is time. I try to let it sit overnight at the very least, if not longer. It's even better when it's a week or two. And then I come back to it and I go, oh, this is all wrong. Literally, sometimes I'll be like, oh, this was horribly established. I should have had moved this panel up to this panel. I'll move this down over here. You see the forest for the trees sometimes when you come back after time. And so that's how I approach it. Brad, does any of that feel similar to you?
100%. 100%. The only equivocation there is that speaking it out loud is a really good strategy. The problem is you've also got to put a little mental note in there that says that some words that are spoken are funnier than they are in print, right? Like
that's true. That is true.
Kumquat is one. Kumquat sounds very funny. I'd say
amazing.
Kumquat in a spoken punchline.
But it looks like a hot mess.
Yes.
Yep, you're 100% right.
And the same thing goes with baloney, unless you purposefully misspell it as baloney. If you go balagna, that's no good. That's no good in a written. So there is that. But as you were, it's so funny. As you were talking, I realized I had really strong opinions on what not to do. I don't know that I can tell you, like, you did a great job of saying, here's what you should do. So listen to Dave when it comes to what you should do. I'll tell you what I think you should not do. And a bunch of them came screaming to mind. One is don't use dialogue tricks. Don't use gimmicks in your dialogue. For example, and we've talked about this in the past, if you're writing somebody with a Southern accent and you're writing out what they would say and you're making it phonetically, you're writing out what they say phonetically instead of just using words, right? And so now for me to be able to understand what this character is saying, I've got to read it phonetically and translate it and say, oh, he's actually saying don't go to the outhouse. But it was, you know, don't you G-A-H to the whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, this phonetic spelling.
Yeah.
I don't like that. And it's a gimmick towards making dialogue sound a certain way.
And I will tell it myself, but then I'll also point out what others do is that when I have a character named Nosh in Drive who learned to speak English but has a Russian accent because he learned it in Moscow. Anyway, long story short is when I have to use his Russianisms, I do it when it's just in a moose boosh,
Right,
like when
just
it's a
a little
sentence that
touch.
when it's just a 3-word balloon where he goes something like "is no good," and he
Right.
just says "is no good." But if he has to have a monologue or if he has to get out a lot of exposition out, I, for the most part, kind of drop the Russianisms.
Yes.
And like you'll sprinkle it in at the top and at the very end, but in the middle, you don't force people to read through a bunch of nonsense because then it becomes. This is the callback I wanted to say. Either Rain Sinclair from the New Mutants or a Banshee from the X-Men.
I hated all
where
of
when
that.
they start writing in the Scottishisms, and it's fine as in a moose boosh, but when every panel is there's no way you're gonna get out.
worst.
And you're like, Lord above, can we just do in a moose boosh of Scottishisms? Why do we have to have all? Yeah, just a kiss, just a kiss
a
of it. We
seasoning.
know that they're from Scotland. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
seasoning,
it's a
exactly.
it's
We know
all
they're from
about-
Scotland, but you read through 20 paragraphs of of their Scottish, and you're like, I want to put a bullet in my head. This is ridiculous. I mean, it slows you down. It slows the reading down. You have to interpret. You know how they often say that people with certain reading conditions, if you imagine it, they have to slow down sometimes and take each word as a unit.
Yes.
That's what I have to do when I'm reading Scottish English written out. I have to slow down, and then I have to do an internal Scottish voice. Yeah. And God forbid there's a 10-year-old reading X-Men who has never heard a Scottish accent before, because I remember being the kid reading X-Men going, wait, what is Rain trying to say
does
here?
that mean
I
when
literally
somebody
have no
says
idea.
Dinnae. Dinnae.
Yes.
What is
Dinnae,
Dinnae? Later on, you're like, oh, that means did not, or is something along those lines, or do not.
Right.
But if you've got to stop and translate like that, you're not reading comics. All of a sudden, it's like reading a textbook.
Exactly. I specifically remember as a kid reading Rain and never having encountered a Scottish person, reading Rain Sinclair, and she was saying "ach," A-C-H.
A-C-H.
And my mind interpreted it to the closest word I knew, which was ache, A-C-H-E. So I thought she was saying ache, which listen, let's to be honest about Scottish, that's probably what they're saying. But what I'm getting at there is that, so the final two passes that I didn't mention in my writing process, and Brad will know both of these too, is that, so remember all the stuff that I said. First, I have to get out the exposition and end on a satisfying note. Usually it's a punchline. Then I go through and I speak it out loud, and then I look for alt word choices, shorter word choices, funnier word choices, right? All that sort of stuff. Then I let time be the editor. The two things that I forgot and I laid out and I need to go back to is there's another writing pass, friends, when I take off my writer's hat and I put on my graphic designer hat and I start to lay out the text in a word balloon. Here's the thing about that. I start laying out that text and I go, this is not flowing.
This
in
doesn't
a word
work.
balloon, this doesn't work. I need to change this sentence. So I know Brad will agree with me. I rewrite at that stage too. Because once you get it into a word balloon, you're like, oh, well, this is not flowing. This is not, because you need it to have natural sentence breaks, structural breaks, that both flow for English, but that also give you satisfying endings and for each line. And here's what I mean. Imagine this sentence in your mind. Close your eyes and you see this. The dog, line break, ran through, line break, the mud.
Right.
Each one of those is a discrete chunk of English and flows nicely in a word balloon that's somewhat squircle or circle based. Right. And you get where I'm going with this. So it's a new factor in how you're structuring that sentence. And so I rewrite at that stage. And then here's the final stage of rewriting, gang. Once I get it all on a drive page and I've drawn, let's say 80% of the comic, I go, wait a minute, I can get rid of this entire word balloon because I have shown, not told. Right. And that is the better way to do half of this stuff. Like I showed the ship getting blown up. Right. I don't need to say, oh no, the ship is blown up anymore because I showed it. Yeah. And that's by the way, that's the creme de la creme in comics is when you can show and not tell. That's so much better. So that's the final stage, I think, Brad, in my writing is the rewriting during layout and the rewriting because the comic itself requires different needs from its English and its dialogue around it. Any other thoughts on that?
Oh no, you hit the nail on the head. I'm just going to put a button on the conversation by saying, along with not getting gimmicky with your dialogue, which I really it's fatiguing to read gimmicky dialogue. Don't get super precious by saying, well, this is how people talk. right? In other words, you'll see people saying, well, I'm not going to write in the Queen's English because I'm going to write how people talk. And then you see word balloons that have words in them like DZJEET. And you go, what's that? Well, nobody asks, did you eat? They say, cheat. And that's how people talk. So that's what goes in my word balloon. You see this every now and again. You know exactly what I'm talking about, where they like, well, that's how people talk. Listen, the minute I have to stop and think about what I'm seeing in your word balloon, then I'm not immersed in that experience anymore.
Right.
And that's where writing, I'm not saying you got to write the way your fifth grade English teacher may have wanted you to write grammatical English, but you've got to approach that because otherwise nobody's going to want to sit there and translate what you're saying unless you're saying something that's really compelling. And there are few people who are able to do that. And that's where you go back to Dave's little amuse-bouche idea, where you just use that as a seasoning, a little bit here, a little bit there. If you've got a snake character, right? You see this every now and again, where somebody has a snake character, and every time there's an S in the word, they put a whole bunch of S's, right? One of those per page is plenty. If you've got drawn out S's every time there's an S in the word, that's fatiguing to read, right? So it becomes, just use this stuff as a seasoning, a little touch here, a little touch there, and a good chef knows a little bit goes a long way. But holy cats, my best advice on this is don't get gimmicky, don't get cute, don't get tied up into I'm gonna show you how people talk. Communicate first. I'm going to leave it on this. My friend John Backdurf, who I knew back when I worked in Ohio, he got away with a lot of this stuff because Northeast Ohio has a very nasal accent. So does he write?
Oh, what do you mean by that? What is a nasal
It's very
accent?
much comes through the nose. It's hard for me to say, other than when you hear people talk.
I mainly want to hear you do it, so please do it.
I don't have that talent. I can't do accents and stuff. I really couldn't. But here's my point.
Is it like Wisconsin? Like, wait, is it like, oh gosh, no, you were not going to go that way?
That's a little bit closer. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But he doesn't change necessarily the words in the word balloons. But when he does that word balloon and the word balloon tail comes off the word balloon, it goes right up the character's nostril. And that's how he visually tells you that this person has a nasally accent, is because the word balloon tail goes up his nose. It's a really beautiful way, I always thought, that he got across that accent without being gimmicky or cute or doing any number of things that would have made his stuff tough to read. He just said, oh yeah, this person speaks with a nasal accent. And those are the kind of creative solution that really makes people's work sparkle.
But anyway, thank you for this question, because this was fun. I don't know that we've talked about it in these terms before, so this was a fun one. Hey, gang, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we'll tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And you'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And ho Nelly, if you want even more comics goodness in your life, check out the new drawing show that we're doing with our pal Kevin McShane over at wrongwayshow.com. That's wrongwayshow.com.
In each episode, we'll show you how to draw your favorite cartoon characters the wrong way.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. And Brad, speaking of things that we wanted to talk about, you had a thought you wanted to bring into the show about political cartoons.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about this. So not so long ago, in an earlier episode, we were talking about political cartoons, and David and I were both kind of decrying political cartoons as they're not, they don't have the power they once had, and they're not, you don't see them around, and man, it must be tough to be a political cartoonist because nobody's out there reading your stuff. And as I've been talking about throughout the show, I've been really addressing my efforts towards Reddit as a platform, and really happy with the results that I've been getting. And of course, that means I've been reading Reddit more. And after recording that show, I was on Reddit later on that day, and it smacked me in the face, is that political cartooning is thriving on Reddit. It's not like they found a refuge or they're just scraping by. There's people doing some really, really powerful, meaningful work. One of which, Ellen was a guest on our show, who does a comic called Pizza Cake, doing really politically charged work that's meaningful and thought-provoking. And Reddit is a place where that stuff is thriving. So without letting too many more episodes go by, we just wanted to put an addendum to that conversation and say, I don't think we got that right, that political cartooning is on the deathbed. It's alive and well over at Reddit.
It is, yeah. And however, I will say that it's alive and well, and Ellen's doing great stuff with it, but I still say that it's a hard road to walk.
Oh, I would think so, yeah.
It's a lot of anger directed to, I mean, poor Ellen gets anger directed at her just for being a woman on the internet, and then being a woman who is comfortable with herself and likes herself. And God forbid you exist as a woman that likes herself on the internet, because Reddit will tear you apart for that. But aside from that, she also it's just a lot of anger directed her way, just in general. And I always think about that for political cartoonists, is that, you know, in the past, I've talked about how one of the things that I can say pretty clearly is that because, thankfully, Sheldon and Drive tend to put out kindness into the universe, that I get kindness back. That equation breaks a little bit with political cartoonists, because you're trying to fix the things that are wrong with the world. Yeah. But often it engenders anger, you know what I mean, from other people. And so, like, you're trying to put out goodness into the world through your political cartooning, but it comes back as vitriol. And I don't know, it just doesn't, I'm just saying it's a hard road to walk, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know that gains anybody by saying it, but I don't know. I guess I'm saying it's not for me. You know, I don't know. I don't know that I could do it on the regular.
But that's the wonderful thing, really, about comics in general, is that and Reddit's a good place to see this in action. You see a lot of different comics that I would say, okay, that's not necessarily my favorite flavor, but I'm glad it exists. Right?
Yes, that's the right way to say it.
Yeah,
yes.
Like wholesome comics, not so much my flavor, but
auto-bio comics, not so much my flavor, but I'm glad they exist.
But and I love when they're done well. D-Fish. And you want to see somebody doing an auto-bio comic well. Look at D-Fish. Always she's got something meaningful in that last panel. It's not just here's what I did today.
And her line art is amazing. Yep.
But like wholesome comics, auto-bio comics,
historical comics, violent comics, horror comics.
A lot of that stuff isn't something that I gravitate towards. Relatable comics. Here's another one. Relatable comics, which for a long time, I would read that stuff and go, wait a minute, where's the punchline? And finally, it takes a long time because I'm thick-headed. Finally, I realized the reason people are gravitating this isn't that it was funny or anything like that. It was that they related to it so strong, and they felt a strong impulse because, somebody else is experiencing the same thing I am.
Yes.
Well, again, not my thing, but I'm so happy that it exists in the world. It really is wonderful to see that there's a little something for everyone, and you can find your place. And if your place is political and you're passionate about that, it's nice to know that comics has a place for you.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you phrased it as there's many different flavors of comics. And that's because I don't want people to take away from when Brad and I get huffy or puffy about this or that genre of comics that we are like, it shouldn't exist. We're just being humans in the world, saying like we have our own tastes and this or that. But part of it getting older, part of it with relatable comics that I realized is is just the realization that you are not alone in a moment. And I don't want to poo-poo that. That counts for a lot in life, is just knowing that you're not alone. And so a lot of relatable comics are, hey, you might be walking this earth separate from me, but you're not alone. We both have this, and that's okay. It's perfectly fine that comic exists in the world and that sentiment is being expressed. And so younger 21-year-old edgier me would have been like, dude, look at this, making relatable comics. And now older me is like, no, you know what? Life is hard. And if this helps you get through it, then fuck you. Yes, this is totally a valid form of comics, younger Dave. Yeah. So anyway, you had another thought, though, Brad, you wanted to bring on the show about Web 1.0.
Dave, I have so many thoughts. We should. Thank God I've got a podcast I can come on and share all my thoughts. No, I had one more. We talked in an earlier episode about, and by the way, you came up with the title during the show, and I love this title so much. I'm going to be pointing to this throughout the year, Reclaiming Our Power. And if you listen to that episode, what we're basically talking about is that as social media really is falling apart in front of our eyes, a lot of people who are creative professionals, comics artists, cartoonists, and so forth are turning to those old Web 1.0, or maybe, I mean, Dave, you and I go back to Web 0.1.
we do go back awfully far. 0.0, yeah.
But those old
I mean, Brad, I coded my first website using Microsoft Word. I'm not joking about that. Pretty
seriously.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's like, we've been around since those little AOL discs showed up on people's front door stoops. But a lot of those Web 1.0 strategies for finding readers and building community, we're starting to see those come back. And the big ones that we talked about were like newsletters, web rings, stuff like that. Even to a certain extent, advertising, although, that is what it is. I'm not going to be putting any money into advertising anytime soon, but you do see people gravitating toward it. So it's worth keeping an eye on. But another Web 1.0 strategy that I think is time to make a comeback is the guest comic. That's where, I might ask Dave to do a episode of Evil Inc. or do like a page or a standalone, a 4-panel Evil Inc. Or, you bring somebody else in and you do, okay, I'm going to do your comic today. You do my comic today. And it's just a special little thing. And in doing so, you say to your readers, hey, here's this other person whose work you might like. Here they are doing something in my universe. And if you like that, just wait till you see what they do in their own universe. And you do some audience sharing, you do cross promotion, linking to each other and all that kind of stuff. I think the guest comic is another one of those Web 1.0 strategies that is primed to make a comeback.
I think it's great. And you know what? Speaking of Reddit actually does this really well in our comics, is they do a lot of guest comic-y stuff back and forth. It's a little bit of a shtick. We all get it. But A, it's fun. It's fun to try to mimic or step into another person's world or style. So that's fun. But 2, it does work. I mean, I remember guest comics in both directions working for me in terms of audience growth and new folks coming in and people discovering me. And so, I co-signed it completely. And in fact, that along with links that I maintain on my site that I can send other people to comics that I enjoy. That's a 1-2 strategy that gets a shared lift for everybody involved in comics. Yeah, I agree with Brad on that.
Yeah, the guest comic is something, by the way, Dave, I'll just toot your horn since you're not.
I'm a married man. Don't you dare toot my horn.
I could see. I was trying to find another phrase, but I was in too deep.
Isn't toot my own horn is the phrase?
Toot my own horn, but like I sing your praises. How's that?
There you go. That's great.
You never left the idea of guest comics. You actually hire people to do Tales from the Drive, which is basically a guest comic.
I suppose it is. You're right.
You never stopped doing it. You've been doing it all along.
I did it, but I professionalized it, because if I'm going to ask a friend or a peer or somebody that I respect to do an 8, 9, 10, 12 page story, I can't just say, hey, give up 2 weeks of your life and do this story.
Yeah.
I have to pay them for it.
Yes.
Like, I have to say your time is valuable to me, and here's what I can afford, and go with that. And so, yeah, you're right. I have continued sort of guest comics. It's funny, though, how I'm continually coming back to, we're coming full circle on this, and that we're going back to some of the stuff.
Yeah.
Because we realized, after being burned probably 3 to 4 times by larger companies, some of whom are now $1 trillion companies, that you got to maintain your own control of your direct line to your audience. That was a little circumlocutus of a sentence, but you get what I'm saying. You've got to maintain that direct line to your audience. And so, using Twitter, using Facebook, using TikTok, using Instagram, yeah, you can, but eventually it'll get yanked away from you, or the rules will get changed because you don't own that direct line. So, guest comics, owning your own website, owning your own mailing list, all of this stuff is just key and towards reclaiming your power. You're right.
Bringing this conversation in this episode full circle, when I was at Moore College Art Expo, the Comics Expo at Moore College Art and Design, I was talking to some of the students there. They'd come around. I was talking to them. And there was some people, by the way, doing some really great work. And I said, hey, where can I find more of your work on the web? Expecting Instagram and so forth. You know how many people told me that they had websites? How many young college-aged people told me they had websites? Almost all of them.
Really?
Almost all of them. And I said, wait a minute, you're making my cold black heart beat just a little bit faster. Why do you have a website? And they would say, evidently there's a class, a professional preparation class at Moore College, where the professor explains to them, you need a website. You need to not build your castle on somebody else's beach. And they were like chapter and verse, the kind of things that we talk about on this show. And I was agog. I'm like, oh my God, it makes me so happy to hear that. They were like, oh no, that this is something that's part of our education now. The fact that we need to have some place that we can own and control our own work. It was heartwarming to see this whole generation that sometimes we're like, are we getting through to these people? If we're not, somebody else is. And it felt great.
That's fantastic news. Boy, that really does make my heart warmed on that thought. That great for that generation and great for those professors that are pushing that. I also wanted to say, because it's worth touching on, that I want to draw attention to the fact that Brad did a comics festival at Moore Comics, because oftentimes people give Brad and I a little bit of grief about, like, why are you guys so anti-comics cons or anti-shows? And I want to remind everybody that we still do them. I still do San Diego Comic-Con. Brad still does local Philadelphia shows. We do it when, and this is the conditional, when it makes financial sense. Right. We're saying, like, yes, you can do networking. Yes, you can do all this stuff. But really, it comes down to, like, you got to take an honest assessment of how much am I spending to do this show and how much am I getting back? And is the second one bigger than the first one? Then okay, maybe Brad and I can sign off on that. Then that's a great thing to do. So yes, Brad's still doing local comic shows. I'm still doing what for me is a local comic show. It just happens to be one of the biggest in the world, San Diego Comic-Con. No, but I'm saying it's a local show, right? I'm from San Diego. I can drive down.
To be one of the largest. Yeah, I like the.
I know. It sounded like a humble brag. I'm just saying, like, if I lived in New York, I probably would do New York Comic-Con if I could make a profit at it.
Yes.
You know, because travel and shipping, that adds a huge amount. Hotels add a huge amount. So doing a local show a lot of times is an okay no-brainer because you probably will turn a profit at that. So yes, it's not. So again, I just wanted to counter our own longstanding argument that most Comic-Cons are not worth it by saying that there still are. You just got to be very careful, and you have to be savvy about what your expenses are versus your money spent.
That's the big thing. Make a smart business choice. The reason I could do this is that it cost me all of maybe $30 by the time you included table fees and food. I bought myself a snack. But like, as far as
ice cream, an ice cream, I'm imagining.
My God, if there would have only been an ice cream man. But like I took books off the shelf and packed them up and brought them in. I didn't have to print anything. Oh my God. I speaking of printing things, Dave, I've never felt the generation gap yawn so widely between me and another person, because I had college students on either side of me. So I had this little tabletop banner stand. And if you don't know what a banner stand is, it's like a window shade in reverse. You know how a window shade, you pull it down?
Yeah.
Well, this, you pull it up from the base, and then it's got a little pole, and you latch it on the pole. Well, for some reason, this thing was, there was a problem. And like 4 times during the day, all of a sudden you'd hear, and it would window shade down. But it was like a real brusque snap.
And probably scared the living shit out of you when it happened.
Yes. And it happened after the 3rd time it happened. I turned to the person to my left and I said, "You'll have to excuse me. I get my banner stands from the same person that does Elmer Fudd's tuxedo."
And they were like, "Who's Elmer Fudd? What's a tuxedo?"
They stared at me with just like a blank look on their face. It was such a funny thing, like, because you remember his tuxedo, it would window shade up, right? They just stared, and I felt liver spots exploding on my wrist. Just nothing. Gave me nothing because of it. That's all. That's it. I just wanted to share.
I had no rejoinder.
You know what finally happened? I said,
what?
I said, "Listen, don't just stand there. Say something to me. Say something. I said something funny to you. Say something." You know what the person finally said? They looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've been listening to Comic Lab, a show about making comics and making a living from comics."
Your hosts have been my ever-delightful friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever-wonderful, ever-whimsical Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, and we know that you do, it's too late. You can't hide it. We know that you do. You can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on future episodes. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, where they are so upset at us. They say, "We got these podcast charts. You keep burning them up."
God, that was such a grandpa joke. What a grandpa joke. And don't forget, gang, you can share your thoughts on today's episode over at the Comic Lab Confab line. That's 1-609-379-3520, 1-609-379-3520, and we may play your message on a future episode.
Make plans to see Comic Lab live at the NCS Conference and Reuben Awards this year, August 6th through the 8th in Columbus, Ohio. Go to nationalcartoonist.com for details.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/grandfather jokes.
And now, broadcasting live from the hallowed halls of Oxford University, where the air is thick with old leather and academic rigor, it's time for The Histories of Sequential Art with our esteemed guest professor, Dr. Reginald Wigglesby.
Tickety boo, old boy, and chip chip. Always a delight to receive a call from Colonel Geiger of His Majesty's 3rd Mounted Regiment. So pip pip, and what ho, Colonel Geiger? What is today's comics query?
Well, Dr. Wigglesby, Today in Comics History, this was a long time ago, Today in Comics History,
Yes.
Miss Peach actually missed her first week of class, and they had to have a substitute teacher. And I was just wondering, why did she miss class that week?
There he is, Miss Peach. Many people will remember Miss Peach standing 17 feet tall compared to the little tiny cherubic children, each of which was drawn under a half-inch tall. Fun fact about that, a half-inch tall, each of the children in Miss Peach. Miss Peach, by the way, Miss Peach, one of the longest-running comic strips in all of American history. Fun fact there. A lot of people not knowing Miss Peach was one of the most continuously running comic strips in the entire history. Another fun fact about Miss Peach, not a single punchline in the entire run of Miss Peach. A fun fact that goes unnoticed by a lot of people. Not a single punchline used.
I think you're confusing Miss Peach with Zippy the Pinhead, but I'll just leave that there.
No, Zippy the Pinhead. Fun fact about Zippy the Pinhead. Yes. Not a single known bit of English used in Zippy the Pinhead. Completely non-sequitorial English, none of which made sense. A delightful comic if you're high as a kite, is one way to say it. Yes, a real, bit of a sticky wicket, that comic, I'll say. But one tries not to get one's knickers in a twist when one reads. One does. One does. But anyway,
one fails if you're Brad Geiger, but yes, one does.
Speaking of failure, Brad, I completely forgot your original question.
Why did Miss Peach miss class for an entire week?
Oh yes, pregnancy scare is the short answer. There, Bradley, pregnancy scare. Bit of a hard cheese on that one. I must say that was a bit of a sticky wicket on that one.